Good morning, everyone. This is Krista Harmon. I am one of the career readiness consultants at the Kent Intermediate School District. And I'm so glad to have a special guest with us today. And his name is Matt Cook. And he is the Vice President of Community Relations. And we're going to have you introduce yourself a little bit more, Matt, to talk about what your title is all about. And you can plug a little bit about your company too. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So our guests will be muted and the videos are turned off. So we're gonna have a great conversation for the next 30 minutes and then we'll round back with some follow-up connections that they can have with you if they have additional questions. So thank you for being here. So Vice President of Community Relations, first of all, tell us, before we get started, what your company is and maybe how long you've worked there, and then we'll get into your career path.
Sure. Yeah. So I work for Lake Michigan Credit Union here in Grand Rapids. We are based here in Grand Rapids, but we have locations all throughout the state of Michigan and also in Southwest Florida. And I have been with Lake Michigan Credit Union coming up on 10 years here in January.
That's terrific. So we're going to definitely hear more about your career path, but I know a lot of students just love to hear how adults kind of get from high school to their careers. So let's take you back to when you were 16 or 17, Matt. Did you think you'd end up in the banking industry? What were you thinking back then? And give us that kind of initial career path.
Ooh, no, not at all. And not to say that that wasn't on my horizon. I have a grandfather who worked for a local grocery store as an accountant, so certainly had some interest in finance. But I did Deca when I was in high school. So for the students that are maybe involved in that, that certainly was a great experience and provided some insight to me as I, explored different career paths and other things. But I went to Grand Valley State University here in Allendale and Grand Rapids, and started my journey thinking I was going to major in international business. And I went to do that, and you have to minor in a language. And I chose French instead of Spanish, which I had done all throughout high school, and that was the wrong decision. And in the transition to college and other things in my first semester, I decided, what, that wasn't the right path. And so then as I was at Grand Valley, kind of just went general business through the first year or two as I was doing my undergrad, and started to get a little bit more of an idea of what path I maybe wanted to go on. And I actually thought I was going to go to law school after a year or two. So my sophomore year at Grand Valley, I was really starting to find an interest in law, particularly business law. I had taken a couple of management and business law classes and was really interested in that. At the same time, in my junior year of college at Grand Valley, I had an internship that I had done in high school for the Grand Rapids Griffins. I had gone and job shadowed on a few game nights and met a few people at their organization. One of the people that I had met actually called me, and they had a dire need for somebody to come and do an internship, kind of last minute. So it wasn't going to be for school credit. It was just really going to be for experience. And, they knew that I enjoyed sports marketing, and again, not even on my radar, not something I had applied for. They just reached out of the blue. And that turned into an experience in which I stayed on there. I actually was in the Honors College at Grand Valley and was there in their office that following summer doing some work. And they had somebody leave. So again, I had just completed my junior year at Grand Valley, and they had somebody leave that was a full-time staff member, and they actually offered me a full-time position, even though I had not completed my college degree. And they were going to work with me to complete the degree while I was in a full-time position. And so I did that. Again, not a path I had even envisioned 6 months before. And so really, really transformational experience. I was put into a role that, previously the woman that had been in that role was a 10-year veteran, in the role that she was in, and had great experience. And I'm basically coming off just being an intern, and apparently I made it a good enough impression that they trusted me in that role. And so I actually oversaw all of our ticket services, which if you ever go to Van Andel Arena, that was the role of the person that was preparing all the ticket orders. They managed the box office, which are those windows that you walk up to on game night. So a really significant role. And one that they put their trust in me to do. And the Grand Rapids Rampage was an arena football team, and they've been gone for about 10 years now, but they played at Van Andel Arena. And so I was with the organization for about 5 or 6 years. And then in the recession, the organization and actually the league folded. And so for me, again, something didn't anticipate, didn't know, lost my job, was able to, kind of then try to put out feelers in my network of figuring out what I was going to do next. I had no idea. I actually looked into, my wife's a teacher, looked into going back to school for teaching because I really enjoyed that. But through some different work that I was doing, I actually got connected with a local nonprofit, which was Michigan Blood. Now it's Versity, and was coordinating blood drives for a year or two and did that. Really enjoyed it. But at the same time, I had actually, my current organization, Lake Michigan Credit Union, had been a client of ours at the Rampage, and I had been in a couple of different roles. I didn't talk about those different roles at the Rampage. I'd gotten promoted a couple times, and I managed the relationship at LMCU, and made some really good connections. And they were interested in hiring me when the Rampage folded, but it just wasn't going to make sense financially for the type of role that they had open at the time. And so that's when I went to Michigan Blood. But after a year and a half of being at Michigan Blood, they called me back and said, "Hey, we have a new leadership development program. Would you be interested in joining? We think you'd be a really good fit for our organization." And so I did. Left a job that I really enjoyed at Michigan Blood. Again, didn't foresee joining the financial services industry, but came into a training program in which I learned the different tools and um, what it meant to work in a bank branch or a credit union branch, and did that. And so was in a leadership development program for about 6 months, served as an assistant branch manager, and then was promoted shortly thereafter to branch manager. And after 2 years in that role, my current role opened up from the person that was that contact that called me when I was working at the Rampage and at Michigan Blood, who is in the role that I'm in now, sort of. It was different then, but she was retiring. And so I was able to apply and get into the position that I'm in now. So a very unique journey, and one that, again, looking back to high school, that I wouldn't have anticipated where I am today, but a lot based on persistence and network, and just challenging myself and being challenged by people that saw potential in me. And that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at today.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And I know for young people, it's so important for them to hear, Matt, that you didn't have it all figured out. And even when you thought you kind of did have it figured out, things twisted and turned. And so I have a ton of things to unpack out of that fantastic career path. Let's start with DECA, because that is a high school option for young people. And some on this watching this video may not know what DECA is. So if you can, I don't know what the acronym stands for, if you remember that, but give them a kind of a big picture, because that might be something they could get into right now, still in high school.
Yeah, I don't remember what the acronym stands for. I should, but I
Okay.
know that it's not necessarily perfectly a great snapshot of even what it is. But essentially, it's a good it's a high school and college based, I guess, almost extracurricular, but a lot of schools do it combined with either your marketing or business classes. So if you take a marketing class at your high school or maybe through the ISD, then a lot of times they'll have a chapter of DECA involved. And so what that involves is getting exposure into a variety of fields. And it's not, when I say marketing, it's a pretty broad spectrum. So that might be promotion, it could be retail and merchandising, and exposure to the different aspects, especially on the business marketing standpoint. There's also a couple of other similar clubs. I think it's Business Professionals of America. Some schools have that instead of DECA or also with it. Pretty similar experience. But I think for me, the substantial part of DECA was I was certainly learning coursework in a high school marketing course that I had at in my local high school. But my participation in DECA challenged me and pushed me into some new experiences. So DECA has competitions. It also has some learning opportunities. So I was able to travel to some different places within the state and actually beyond, to go learn about different fields and how marketing worked. And so that was really informative for me, especially later on. And when I mentioned that job loss, that was helpful to understand some of the positions that I was looking to apply for, what those meant. But I still today am a judge for DECA in their annual, the district and state competitions. So anybody that participates in DECA, you can go to a district competition, which here in Kent County, they compete at Fair State University, usually in December and January, and you get to do some role plays. So you get a scenario where you're challenged to creatively come up with a solution, based on a business case study. And there's also sometimes a test associated with that, and people score and can move on to state competition. There's also some team, I guess, team participation events. And so you can go with a group of other class members if you're not there, but it also pushes you just even in the public speaking. It's not that you're getting up on a stage, but you're sitting in front of a business professional like myself, when I serve as a judge, and you go through and explain your concept, and then you get feedback afterwards. And I think to me, that was one of the greatest things, is just hearing feedback from somebody else that wasn't my teacher, that I could, trust and rely on, what they were providing. So definitely a formative experience for me in my journey.
And thank you for sharing in such detail because, again, for young people, they might intuitively think, man, it's somewhere in business. Like they know that, but how else do you find out? And so, young people, think about that where you can get involved in. Again, the acronym is DEC, as in Charlie, A, Deca. So do a little Google on that. And again, it will help you just really stretch yourself and learn about different occupations, have those experiences with traveling and meeting other adults and having the opportunity to public speak. So thank you so much for that, Matt. So you're at Grand Valley and you're thinking international business because you had done some foreign language in high school, and then you switched off to general business. What got you thinking about law school at the time, and maybe why you decided not to go in it? Was it because the shift happened where you got this internship, or what kind of led you away from law school?
Yeah, so that's a wild journey. And the short of the long is I had a professor who was a well-renowned lawyer, actually, for the state of Michigan, and had her own personal practice. And she was one of, at the time, after switching from international business, I had chosen management and marketing. As at Grand Valley, it's pretty easy to double major, and I knew that I wanted to do that. Marketing was something I knew, again, based on the Deca experience and some other things, that I knew that it was going to be one of the ways that I explored. But also, management is a pretty broad sense, and I had gotten a lot of advice from from advisors in college and from some other teachers to try that and then see what it would develop into. And so one of my teachers, I loved her class. It was incredibly difficult, probably one of the hardest classes I took in college, but it was one of where I really respected her, and she challenged me, and I had a lot of just things that made me like, oh, I could really enjoy doing this. And so that's where I started her journey. She wasn't necessarily originally in business law, but she had gotten involved in that. And so it was like, oh, this is a path. I'd asked her questions about it, and started to explore what it looked like. With law school, there are a couple options now, but at the time I had to make a choice. I could start doing some classes my senior year. And again, this was in my junior year when I was evaluating this more in the fall. But in my senior year, I could begin to take some law school classes, and then there'd be at least a year, probably two, beyond my bachelor's degree, to be able to, continue to pursue that law degree. So when I took the internship with the Rampage, I still was likely going to be pursuing that path. However, when they presented the job offer that summer, it was kind of one of those points of where you have to figure out, like, okay, what, it's a fork in the road. Like,
Sure,
do I
sure.
continue to go, this way, or do I take something, I was learning a ton, even as an intern, in this position with the Rampage. And so, kind of after talking to some different people, including that professor who was really, again, a resource for me, I decided, what, there's no reason I can't later decide to, go down that path. And I think even outside of just that story, that's important, I think, for students to hear too, is just because you choose a certain major, you think you're going down a certain path. Obviously, my story is a good example of even what degree you choose isn't always where you end up. And I think that you don't have to feel forced in one direction. And so that was really helpful for me in making that choice of, I was asked by a couple people of like, are you going to enjoy what you're doing? Is it going to provide good experience for you? Is there opportunity to grow? The answers in that were all yes, as it related to the full-time job offer that I was given. Also, that they were going to let me pursue my, finishing my degree, that was most important to me at the moment. And
Sure.
so it kind of was one of those things of where, all those things considered, it was like, hey, let's try this, and I can always go back to the other route if I need to. But ended up pursuing that other path, and never turned back.
And I think what I'm hearing from you too is two key things for young people to keep in mind: that you were very intentional with having conversations with adults in your life who, and this professor being one who you admired, and so you were active in that discerning process. and that you were being open to new opportunities, that you weren't lockstep, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and not being open to a new opportunity. And I think that's really important for young people to hear. There's actually something called the happenstance career theory. And it really, you're a beautiful example of that, how things happen in our journey that we do not anticipate, that is actually part of the universe saying, go this way, go this way. And it's helping you along. So for you to get this offer, out of the blue in some sense, or they came back to you after your high school internship and said, hey, we liked you. We liked your work ethic. We liked your attitude. We want you on our team as this next step intern, to be open to that and say, well, no, I'm working on this law degree. I can't go that way. That you were flexible and looked at some new opportunities. So young people, just really keep that in mind of what Matt's sharing, is that being open to new possibilities can open up so many doors. So I just love that part of your story.
Yeah, one thing I want to add there too is just
Sure.
that I think a lot of times at 16, 17, 18, you think that even as you're evaluating what college you're going to go to, or, maybe what degree you're going to pursue, you think like, I'm making that decision, it's a forever decision. My wife's a teacher, and, that in some fields, there is, a somewhat forever piece of that. It becomes harder to change. But for most people in a lot of fields, you don't have to at 16 and 17 have that figured out. It's nice to have some sort of idea what you'd be interested in doing, but it also doesn't have to be the be all end all. And if you're really struggling with that choice, that's okay. And I think that's, kind of to what I was saying about, trust the people in your life, or there are people out there that certainly can help you evaluate, what is the right path to kind of pursue, and leave yourself some open doors.
Absolutely. And so after the rampage, when the league folded, you started considering, hey, what else should I do? And you mentioned teaching. And I love that, because teaching has so many components of it that really transfer into other fields. Do you find even now that you have a teaching role at sometimes
Oh,
and so that part of your teacher's heart is still being met in your current role?
100%. So that is still something today. I guest speak a lot in college classes. For our organization, I help administer some of our financial wellness, or you might, hear it referred to as financial literacy. So I'm often in front of some classes, less so in the pandemic, but, certainly in other spaces. Also in my role, I do a lot of internal education and advocacy. And so I do get to provide some of that education, not in the traditional, K through 12, or, college professor type of role, but it is certainly something that has come out in a different way, in an unexpected way.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage young people. I also have a teacher's heart. I actually got an undergrad with teaching. I am in the school system, but I don't teach in a traditional way, but I still get to impart knowledge. And I love that. And I just want to encourage young people that if you feel like you're a teacher, but you don't want to do the traditional classroom like my husband is, and your wife happens to be, that there's so many ways you can be a teacher. So thank you for sharing that. So let's give the students kind of a big picture of what a VP in community relations does. So tell us about that role. And kind of, I know you probably don't have a typical day, but what are some of those tasks, just to get them excited about these other type of jobs that maybe they never heard about?
Yeah, so my role has certainly evolved in the 7 or 8 years that I've been in the seat for the organization. But on a really high level overview of some of the things that I get to do, I oversee our organizational philanthropy. So when I say philanthropy, that means the dollars that we are donating back into the community. So when you hear the word nonprofit, some of those nonprofits in the community, so a kids food basket here, or our hospital foundations, or Habitat for Humanity, ICCF, those types of organizations, I'm the one in my team. I oversee a team of 3 individuals, where we get to manage our organization's money that we're giving back to those organizations in the community. And so that's a really big and important piece of what I get to do. And there's strategy behind that. We get a lot of people asking for us to help. And so it's trying to figure out what are the best ways for us to help. And also, in that strategy, figuring out what is the best way for us to help create community impact and improve the community through our giving. So that's a big piece, and something I'm really passionate about. Also is something that I'm able to then do on my personal time as well. And then also oversee our organizational experiential marketing. And so what that is typically you'll hear the word sponsorship. So for example, I talked about my experience at the Griffins. my career's come full circle. I now am a sponsor of the Griffins. And so you'll see LMCU's branding if you go to a Griffins game. And my team oversees that relationship or things like that. And so that goes down to different community events, other engagement opportunities as well, things like your home and garden show, those types of activities. And so our team oversees our participation in that for branding, for awareness of who we are, also trying to acquire new customers for the organization in those ways. We also oversee employee volunteerism, so providing opportunities for our staff to be able to go out into the community and make an impact and give back is something that I have some oversight over. I do some publicity and public speaking. So yesterday I got to be on the radio, and occasionally we'll do TV interviews as well, and represent our organization out in the public in that way. A lot of other things. I mentioned financial wellness. That's a big initiative and something we're really working on right now as far as helping both our membership, and so the people that are our customers, but also just the general community be able to be financially well. And in this time more than ever, that's really important. And so those are a broad spectrum of the things that I do. I also, I report up to our senior executive over marketing. And so I'm a departmental leader within that team. So I have some broad oversight of some other things outside of some of the buckets that I just plugged into. So do some strategic planning and, again, publicity and those types of things. But it's a broad overview of what that looks like. Every day is very different. In a non-pandemic world, I am out meeting with people a lot. So I do a lot of coffee and lunches and attend different events. I mentioned we have a statewide presence, and then also in Florida. So I do a decent amount of traveling, mostly not overnight, but I'll travel across the state, and come back. But really a lot of fun. Everything is very different, and we're able to engage with kind of all of our employees, but also the community at large. So it provides a lot of joy, and I get to do a lot of really neat and exciting things on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's probably such a wonderful surprise for young people to think that you can actually have a job where you get to give away money and sponsor, other nonprofits and get to go to lunches as part of your job and get to travel. That sounds very exciting for people. And I guess I want to help them understand that, because sometimes young people will tell me like, well, how would you know how to do all that?
Mm.
And just to really point out that it was that career path where you started with different jobs and picked up skills along the way. And I don't want to miss out on really stepping into that leadership development opportunity that you were given when you first started with Lake Michigan Credit Union, because of other relationships you had built with them. So for young people, sometimes it all doesn't come down to that college degree. Things can change even in the training that you get. So tell us a little bit about in-house training and just those opportunities that young people can get, even if maybe you had an English major and now you want to do a job like yours. How do people take those twists and turns?
Yeah, I'm a person that I love to learn, and that doesn't mean that you have to be in your own journey, but I think that it's really important to understand that learning doesn't stop happening, when you're out of high school, or when you're, if you pursue college or trade school, that's not where everything stops, right? You continue in most fields and in most roles, you're going to continue to learn both through experience and doing day-to-day work and exposing yourself to new things, but also in some job related trainings and other things. And I think for me, it's a mix of, some trainings that definitely were being provided, also being put into roles that stretched me. So that first role at the Rampage, I was put into a role of where it was like, I sat in the seat, I had about a week with the person that sat there before me. And then it was like, okay, figure this out. And I can learn well that way. I learn by doing a lot of times. And so that was certainly an experience that helped me and helped me grow. I think a lot of organizations, Lake Michigan Credit Union included, we do a lot of in-house training. And so we have a group, it's now more of a buzzword, but organizational development instead of training, where individually as a manager, I am going through a course about once a month that shares how I can be a better leader, how I can be a better manager. There are also a lot of that same team administers some learning for people in different roles throughout the organization to help them learn. So it might be the teller that's on the front line in one of our branches that you might visit, and they're getting trained on things that can help them grow in their career beyond just being a teller and other things. And so there is a lot of ongoing training. One thing that I would encourage just anyone that's listening to this though is sometimes because those things, are very prescriptive. You're in this role, here's the learning, but there's also a lot of things, for me, like I said, I love learning. And so the internet is a great, source of resource to be able to learn new things, but there's also a lot of opportunities within the community to get exposed to other things. And don't be afraid of that. Those are the ways that you can meet new people, make new connections. Again, connections have been really important in my story. And so I think, to me, learning is kind of a 360-degree view of, there are always new opportunities to learn things, and being open to do that. Or if you're asked to do a new task, do it, because then you've got that experience, and that's something you can talk about to somebody later, or in an interview, or hey, maybe that's a job opening that opens up later. And so I think those are always experiences that can be really fruitful.
Absolutely. And even you being here today was a networking connection, because you're part of Leadership Grand Rapids and have a friend who knew you. And so that networking piece, for sure, in your career path has been so important. Give students just a quick definition of what that networking is and how you have been able to capitalize on it.
Yeah, I would say networking is as simple as relationship, beyond just knowing somebody's name. You know who they are, right? And so if I am meeting somebody for coffee, is a great example of, like, sometimes that's a required, like, I need to meet them, but sometimes I could also have just made a phone call, or doing, or connected with them via LinkedIn, or, Facebook, right? But at the same point, to me, I want to get to know that person. I want to then be able to understand, like, hey, this is what they do. So if I have a need, I might be able to call them. Or if somebody else introduces me to somebody, I want to be able to continue to get to know them more. And so for me, networking becomes a relational experience, in something where, if, for example, in your high school, you may have a class with somebody, but that might be your only interaction. Well, then down the road, if you see each other outside of saying hi, you don't know where to go with that. But the people that you are able to get to know a little bit deeper, are intentional about spending, some time. That's not meaning that you're going over to their house, or doing those things, but where that you can, give them a call or ask them a question. Those are the types of relationships that can be really helpful. And I would say, particularly in a career journey, um, starting, whether in your next step beyond high school, or even while you're in high school, getting to know some mentors or people that can be helpful to bounce ideas off of, but then be someone that can introduce you. I know, as you're applying for jobs, in the future, that can be really helpful. Or even now, maybe you're looking for a job for the summer or for Christmas break. Those are, a lot of times, it might be that your parents know somebody, or somebody, and that's how you're able to get a job. That comes down to networking in your sphere of influence, and the people that you've interacted with. Those can be really, really helpful experiences.
And just to remind young people, it's so important to always do your best, give your best, have that work ethic, because it sounds like so much of your path, Matt, were people who really thought highly of you and said, hey, we want to have Matt on our team. And like you said, it kind of came full circle, with the woman who left the current position you're in, that she had such a fond, view of who you are as a person, and what you do, and your skill sets that you developed. So it's just really important, young people, to just always do your best. You never know who's watching. You never know who's looking. It could lead to the next thing. So we have about 2 minutes left, Matt. Obviously, I could dig into so many things. I mean, just even your public speaking and how you develop that. But let's just talk about soft skills, those skills that we try to work with young people in high school. You mentioned how relational your job is. You've certainly had to be flexible, that you're kind of a person that takes initiative, that teamwork of all the different leadership and teams that you're on. Is there anything other, as far as qualities, that you want to just kind of point out that has made you as successful in your career path, that maybe we can just kind of enumerate for young people?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, just especially managing people, and, I mentioned to you earlier, like, I oversee interns and other things. And I think one of the biggest things that make people stand out is the way that you carry yourself. So don't complain about things, work hard, be diligent, show up on time, do some of those things, because those stand out and make a difference. Like, it's not just how you do the work, or sorry, it's not just the work that you do, it's how you do the work, right?
Sure.
So as we see, as I see my peers and the people that I'm managing, a lot of times it is really, the people that end up shining aren't necessarily always somebody that is the smartest person in the room. Sometimes it's the hardest working person, but also the person that, is encouraging and in helping out other people or stepping in when there is a need. So again, not complaining about it, but recognizing like, hey, my colleague might need my help. I'm going to help them out. And so I think those are things that are really important. But again, that positive energy is really big. And that doesn't mean that everything is going to go great all the time, but it does mean that, you don't need to bring others down besides you. And I think that's something, especially in the workforce, that's really important, just in helping to spur positive energy.
Such good wisdom. I appreciate that. Two things as we finish up. I think you have a scholarship you'd like to plug. And then I'm going to have you share out a word of wisdom as I pull up a slide with your email. So go ahead and talk about that
Awesome.
scholarship.
Yeah. So for any of you that are viewing this that are high school seniors, or even if you're a sophomore or junior, remember this for future years. But at Lake Michigan Credit Union, we have a high school scholarship. It's an essay program. So between November 1st and January 31st. So for current high school seniors, it'd be January 31st of 2021. We accept entries. We have you don't have to be a member of Lake Michigan Credit Union, but we will be giving out 20 $2,000 scholarships. So I encourage you, the website for that is LMCU, as in Lake Michigan Credit Union. So lmcu.org/HUT, which is HUTT. And again, you can find out all the details about that, but we'd love to have you apply. And we award those 20 $2,000 scholarships near the end of the spring. But again, that's for current high school seniors, and sophomores and juniors. Definitely check it out. It's something we offer annually.
Yeah, and it's my understanding of when my kids were at that age, it's an essay prompt, just one question. And so it's not really lengthy like a lot of other scholarship applications are. So that I know makes it very doable for young people.
Yeah, and it doesn't take into account any grades or anything else like that. It's completely anonymous, other than you submit your information at the end of the process. So judges don't know where you went to school or how you've done in school. It's all based on the essay itself. So
yeah, that's great. That's hopeful for a lot of young people that maybe their grades aren't where they want them to be by their senior year. Thank you for offering up your email, Matt. Because you are the VP of Community Relations, you have some probably more flexibility in your career than the average person to do some follow-up questions. So here it is, everyone, matt.cook@lmcu.org. And again, if you have any questions for me, I'm Krista Harmon at the Kent ISD. We have some great programming to help young people figure this all out. And so that can be found at careerreadiness.kentisd.org. We have more career chats coming up with a variety of professionals with jobs that you may not be familiar with. So it's just great for you to learn about what's out there so you can aspire to those kind of things. So careerreadiness.kentisd.org is where you can find those. So Matt, man, that half hour goes fast, doesn't it?
It does.
So just give us a final word of wisdom and then we'll let you back to your day. Thank you so much.
Sure. I would just give encouragement to all the students listening, just be who you want to be. Don't feel pigeonholed into one certain path. And just because your parents do something or you've got people that are pushing you in a certain direction, be open to finding what's going to bring you joy and passion, and also be flexible and be open to change. Because like I, shared in my own journey, I didn't imagine being here, almost 20 years ago when I graduated from high school. But I think it is a really fruitful journey if you are open to that. It's really hard if you're not. And so I think, in that, I would just give you encouragement of, start to explore different experiences. Internships and job shadows are a great thing to do while you're in high school and even as you go into college or trade school. So best of luck in your journey, and feel free to reach out with any specific questions for me.